So, Revelations of Divine Love. What made you want to make this film?
I was driven by madness to make this film. I think a lot of it had to do with where I was, where my head was at when I heard about Julian for the first time. I was really unhappy, and I found out about her because my co-writer, Dr. Lawrence Bond, PhD, he just defended earlier this year, so I get to call him Dr. Lawrence Bond, PhD all the time.
Congrats.
Yes, I will tender your congratulations. We're very proud of him. At the time, he had just started going back to school to study history, and specifically medieval history. We had made a film together a few years prior called The Feast of Man. If anyone saw that one, odds are good that, yeah, thank you, one person. And he's in the film. It's a very like broad kind of satirical dark comedy, and he plays a small but very pivotal role in the film. And I was very dispirited after the festival, or lack of festival run of my film. I'd finished Feast of Man and hadn't gotten in anywhere, and nobody wanted to see it, and I felt like a failure, and I was struggling to find the will to go on living, as one so often does, you know. And he, everybody does, right? And he read me a paper that he had written about Julian of Norwich when I was at my emotional nadir, and it was like a literal revelation, and that I can't believe this hasn't been made into a movie. I feel this way. I understand how this person feels. This person who wrote 600 years before I was alive. Like, I didn't know that this happened to people, that women wrote this way, et cetera, et cetera.
It's one of like the earliest pieces of writing in the English language by a woman, yeah?
Right now it's considered the earliest, but what's crazy about the Middle Ages, like historically, or like the history of the Middle Ages, is that we're going off of really scanty primary source material. So tomorrow, somebody could find a manuscript in a dusty church somewhere in England that's older than Julian's work, and it would completely undo the entire kind of selling point that I used in my grant applications for this movie. So, I mean, and like for the good of humanity and like human history and whatever, like I totally hope that like it would be cool if that happened, but for my marketing materials, I think they should find it in 6 months after the run's done. So anyway, yeah, I was at an emotional nadir, and I was gripped by this, and I feel like what happened to her is not dissimilar from what happened to me, in that I wanted, as she had, to be like as close to death as possible, and then received this wild ass transmission, and then devoted, she devotes the rest of her life to doing this. I devoted 8 years of my life that I hope is not the rest of it, because now I have to make another movie, right?
Yeah.
That's how that works.
Yeah, you've been working on this movie since I met you.
For a long fucking
time. Yeah. And it was like, I remember you had like a rap party for it, and you were like
3 years ago.
3 years ago. That was part, okay.
That's how fucking long I've been working. And that was 5 years after I had, or however many years. Yeah, 5. Yeah, 5 years after I had come up with the idea.
So the first question that I had after I watched this was, have you seen Household Saints?
Oh, no, I haven't.
Wait, what?
Is it good?
Oh my God. Yeah. You're gonna have a really good experience with Household Saints when this is over, but since you don't know what
Wait, that's the Nancy Savoca movie, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I should totally see this. I love it.
Yeah.
I'm gonna watch it tonight. I'll let you know. I'll text you.
Okay. Yes. Good. Could you? So this is like this is a period piece, and I guess I wanted to know in terms of like production and your budget, like how you managed to pull this off, because I couldn't believe it when I finally watched it.
I will say right off the bat that we got so many things that you see on screen for free.
Yeah.
And let me tell you how. Through the Materials for the Arts, which is a free store run by the Department of Cultural Affairs in New York City. And if you are an artist and you have a fiscal sponsor, we use The Field, but there are many others. You have a fiscal sponsorship, you can apply for access to Materials for the Arts, and it's a huge, it's like a warehouse, like at the end of Indiana Jones, or it feels that way.
Oh, okay.
And
cool.
It's in Long Island City. It's impossible to park there, so if you're bringing a van or a box truck, you're shit out of luck, but you need a van or a box truck to get most of the stuff in there. Yeah. And it's all kinds of stuff that productions donate to Materials for the Arts. So we got, reams and reams of fabric. We got a ton of paint. All the candles that you see in that film are fake candles. They're like battery powered. That I found boxes of it, Materials for the Arts, and we walked out with it for free, because it's a free store run by the government, which is what the government's only job should be, in my opinion. Or at least one of like 4 jobs that also improve the material standing of regular people. But it's like a free store. So a lot of it was just like being resourceful. Like we'd go in there and we'd see stuff that kind of worked, and it's not like we're spending money, so just throw it in the cart and walk, and if you can find a use for it, you find a use for it. There are chairs in that scene that Gabe found on, like in one of those scenes that Gabe found on the street. I think the chair in Julian's room where, like when she's on her sick bed, that kind of like carved chair. Gabe found those 4 chairs on the street while we were shooting. The chairs in Father Ambrose's quarters, when he has his meeting with Father William, 2 chairs from my apartment that I brought in. There's at least 3 chairs from my apartment that are in this movie. And that's just some of the stuff. The other thing that helped is that we made everything out of foam, and we were able to repurpose a lot of things. So it's a lot of dressing and redressing, you know, painting stuff to look different overnight, and a lot of like blood, sweat, and tears, you know. But also nailing the stuff that would resonate as period, and not sweating the small stuff. Like being very selective about certain objects, like the hazelnut being in that box. You know, I got that box. I think it's like a brass box that is mass produced in India. And it's supposed to be a replica of like an older historical brass box. And I got it at a flea market somewhere upstate. I got a lot of stuff at flea markets. And because I was working on this movie for 8 years, was like, throughout my life, like Katamari Damacy, like just absorbing like any kind of medieval tchotchke that I could encounter and like hiding it in my apartment. Like I just have big bins and boxes of stuff. So it's just a lot. I mean, yeah, we had to buy a lot of crap, but like all the paint and stuff we got for free from Materials for the Arts. I mean, it's crazy how much we got from them.
And where did you shoot?
We shot it in a warehouse, not really a warehouse like 90s video warehouse, like more like a garage, like a big kind of garage. That was in Ridgewood. It was on Decatur and Wyckoff, and it used to be wardrobe staging for the TV show Blue Bloods. So there was a washer dryer in the front, and then like a little front office with a bathroom, and then there's like a big space. I'd say it's probably, I don't know, this is a really big room. I'd say it's probably about half the size of this room. Maybe a little more, and we have then a back area. So again, same deal, we would dress and redress and dress and redress. And we shot all the stuff that was in Julian's anchor hold for the first half of the shoot. And then once that was done, we tore down the wall that separates her room from Sarah's room. And then we had a much bigger space that we would repaint or do whatever, you know.
So this is like a pivot, but this was my second question. The second question that came to my mind. How did you decide how Jesus was going to look?
Okay, so
because like especially if you look at like when you finally do see Household Saints, it's like it's a very like very white Jesus.
Yeah. So the easiest historically accurate thing we could put in this film was having a historically accurate Jesus, and I like. This is for multiple reasons. And what I like is having a film that you would expect to have the European Jesus in, but you don't, because it's a film that's set in medieval Europe, so you would think, okay, we're gonna have art history Jesus in here. But what I thought was going to really like help people understand Julian's relationship to Christ and my kind of interest in Christ as a real person and a philosopher, was to have a Jesus that would be recognizable to us as regular people. Like that's a big part of when you make a religious film that's set in an era that's in many ways very unfamiliar to us. That's one of the ways that you create familiarity. And without that familiarity, no one's gonna believe that this happened to this woman, and they're not gonna think it's important. They're not gonna watch the movie. Yeah. So I worked with casting agents for a couple of these really kind of crucial parts. Sarah was one of them, Sister Beatrice was one of them, Jesus was one of them. And when I was talking to the casting agents, they're like, what do you want? You want Jesus? And I was like, yeah, okay. Here's what I want. Here's what I'm looking for. And I sent them pictures of the Fayum sarcophagi, which if you don't know, great Wikipedia article, the Fayum sarcophagi were sarcophagi painted in Egypt and present-day Jordan, present-day Palestine, present-day Greece, you know, because it was all kind of one, it's the Levant. Yeah. Everybody's moving around. It's one big kind of thing. And they were sarcophagi, people who were important enough when they were buried to have their faces painted on their burial structure. And when I think about what people looked like over there in the year 1 CE, when Jesus Christ was alive and ministering to people, they probably looked like these sarcophagi that were painted in 1 CE in the Levant when Jesus had his ministry. So it felt like this was going to be, you know, in a movie that's so much about artifice and about like using art history to represent things and to evoke things, I wanted something to be really real about that. And I wanted Jesus to be really real because if you just think that Jesus is like a made-up guy or just a picture that you've seen in Sunday school every week and whatever, then it's not going to feel resonant to the audience. At least that was my hunch. I think it worked.
Yeah, I think so.
And Abe is great. He gave a great read. I mean, I cast him.
I mean, he was like a hot Jesus.
Yeah, I thought, well, so, and the other thing about having a hot Jesus is that, like, you know, what are people going to want to look at and think about more than a hot guy?
No, you're looking deeply into his eyes for a lot of it.
But he's also such a beautiful actor. Like,
Yeah.
his performance is really, like, you know, I talked to him about, like, Maria Falconetti and Passion of Joan of Arc and about silent cinema and, like, to kind of act,
it's
like,
all about the eyes,
the
and
eyes,
the expression.
he acts like from the inside out too, you know. And like even though we were planning to do Julian's voice as Jesus's voice, because like what does Jesus sound like? I don't want to get into it. This is not the movie about that. You know what I mean? Like he put a lot into it. He put everything into it.
Yeah.
And he did such a good job. And he was a real fucking trooper being out there in Pennsylvania in late February or whatever in like a little loincloth. Being out on Plum Beach in a little loincloth. I mean, we shot it in April, and like, it's almost April now, and it is not nice out, so you can imagine what it was like at the beach, you know?
Do you want to take questions from the audience?
I don't know, does the audience want to ask questions?
Does the audience have questions?
If you don't, that's fine, we can keep talking. Oh, okay.
Okay, we got one right here.
All right, watching this film, I can just see it was an enormous undertaking. And the quickest way you can get into an argument with people is politics and religion. Now, as far as I can see, for you to have the drive to work 8 years on a film like this, I know it took a long time, but 8 years was a lot. There must have been some sort of a spiritual awakening in your life to want to make a film like this. Can you tell us about that?
Sure, you were absolutely right on the money. I mean, I wouldn't say that my spiritual awakening is exactly like Julian's, because I'm still fascinated by medieval Christianity and like medieval Christian mysticism and how people feel this way and why at this time those feelings manifested themselves in such a specific body of work, because there are other accounts from other mystics that were written at this time too. Julian's the earliest written by a woman, but there's also Teresa of Avila, there's Hildegard von Bingen, who a lot of people know. What's in the water at this time that the spiritual awakenings that people have take that shape, I should say. Whether you believe that these things really occurred to the mystics that recount them, or whether you want to take a very lofty post-enlightenment scientific read and go, they had a brain tumor, and they were epileptics, or whatever. I mean, I don't know. I'd like to believe that if something mystical happens to somebody and they really feel it, then it really happened to them. And my feeling about this is very similar. I was really moved by Julian's text and what it was about, and it felt like a big kind of challenging dual glove slap in the face to what I had perceived around me as a real absence of love for the stranger or for people in your life that you may not be intimate with. I mean, it's always the answer, right? Like, everything points to it. And that meant a lot to me then, it means a lot to me now. I'm a big fan of ego death. I love going to the movies, I love going dancing. I don't think that it's the same thing as going to a house of worship necessarily, and I think it's sometimes a little sloppy to equate going to a club with going to church, but like, ultimately we're seeking the same thing in a communal environment, right? The abandonment of the self and the feeling of accord with one another. So, that's part of it too. Medieval life is like very much lived in public, and people are in communal spaces more often than not in medieval life, and I wanted to pay my homage to that, Good question, thank you.
You see another question?
Oh, do you?
Do
I
you?
don't. No, we should just keep talking.
Okay, we can just
Oh,
keep talking.
what?
Oh, wait, is there somebody?
Oh.
So you were working with actors you cast and also, seems like friends and acquaintances, and what was it like, could you talk a little bit about your process of directing this big cast of all these different types of performers?
Absolutely.
Did everybody hear?
Should we summarize?
Yeah. You talk about like your experience as a director, working with all of these different performers and friends. I mean, it's like a lot of people that you know.
Sure is.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, part of it is out of necessity. Like, I know a lot of people who have odd schedules, and knowing that people can come through in the middle of the day, in the middle of the week to like wear a little hat and hang out and have a snack and do a great job is like really helpful. I liked working with the actors that I didn't know. There were some parts that were written for actors I did know. So Tessa's part as Julian, Theo's part as Father Ambrose, Anae's part as Hamlin the curate. And then other parts got kind of fleshed out as I started to think more about who would be good for this. So like, you know, Ayanna plays Countess Ufford, and like I had this part in the...
Ayanna is so good.
She's so fucking good in this.
Yeah.
She can really wear an historical costume like none other.
Oh, she
was
looks
great.
incredible in her
She was so
costume,
good.
yeah.
And she's a filmmaker too. A lot of the people in the cast too are also like other filmmakers. And I think filmmakers understand like how hard it is to make a movie and would be kind of cool with it and down to do whatever. And they understand like what it is to be on set, so they're patient. Like they're not sweating it the way that people who don't act normally are. But you know, I met her when we did an episode of the Screenslate podcast together about Batman, and Countess Ufford is in the script, but I sat next to her on John's sofa and we talked about Batman. We had this very lively kind of conversation back and forth about this thing that we're both very passionate about, which is Batman. And I thought to myself, okay, I've already got a scene where two women are arguing about St. Augustine, which they're both very passionate about, not unlike my passion for Batman. And then I thought, you know, yeah, that's great. Like, wouldn't she be great as Countess Ufford? And then I thought, I want to see more of her on screen than what's on there now. So I fleshed out their debate a little bit more, knowing that like she'd get to have more screen time too. And then working with people who are not necessarily performers, but are accustomed to being around them. Ultimately, I think if you have an idea in your mind of what tone you want uniformly throughout the scene and then throughout the film at large, it's not hard to explain that to people. Most directing is just talking to people, and I'm better at talking to people than I am at any other fucking thing in my life. So if I can do that to a bunch of different people who are coming from different kind of degrees of familiarity with film craft, that I can get everybody on the same wavelength and we can keep it consistent. And a lot of that was also the set and setting. Being in this built environment, being in a little room that's been painted to look like a convent or a little kitchen or whatever, you know, you get into costume, the costume puts you in a certain mood, and this is what I heard from people. I'm sure there are people, probably I should have asked this at the beginning, who were like in this movie, and if you are, you can raise your hand and point yourself out. That's right. Chris, who played Walter, is here. Great role. And then, who's that in the back? Oh, hey, Jody, and Jody, the poacher's wife. Give them both a round of applause, you guys. Thanks. That's right, I'm buying some time. Anyway, yeah, so that's just, you know, other people who've worked on movies, who've done movie stuff before, like, we all know what's going on. We all know the game. It's just the Middle Ages.
Well, you, of course you didn't edit it, but kind of like, what was the kind of the process and like how, because this is very short, was there a version that was longer, or did you just get a very like clear, unified vision?
There is a version that's longer that jumps ahead in time and has Julian's kind of initial meeting with Marjorie Kemp, who's another fantastic English mystic. If you are not familiar with the Book of Marjorie Kemp, somebody's clapping for the Book of Marjorie Kemp. Yeah, I'm seeing some acknowledgement of the Book of Marjorie Kemp. You want to talk about, by the way, a sexy Jesus and a hot Jesus situation. Book of Marjorie Kemp, she and Julian like had this encounter, and we don't know 100% that the two of them had this encounter, but Marjorie talks about going to Norwich and meeting Julian, the anchoress who lives there, and they lived at the same time. So I'm just going to roll the dice and say, oh, and at St. Julian's Church in Norwich. So the odds are good that it's the same Julian, right? And I wanted this scene with the two mystics where they're in dialogue with one another because Marjorie Kemp's experience with Christ is so different from this. It's very sexual in an unmistakable way. She talks about this very orgasmic bodily encounters that she has with Jesus. She had a crazy ass life. She had 14 kids. She cried all the time. She got dispensation from the bishop.
She lived a full life.
She had a full life, and then she got a permission from a bishop to leave her husband and kids behind and business, because she was like a brewer too, a girl boss, to leave them all behind and go on pilgrimage forever. Like just leave them and be like, bye, I'm on pilgrimage forever. So there was a scene at the end that we shot with, where there's like a time jump and there's different actors and stuff. And, you know, and I go back and forth with Zach in the edit because the performances are great, the sets are great. Like everything about it I think is very a piece with what we were doing. It doesn't feel different from the movie in such a radical way, but I talked to Zach about this and he said, I don't imagine a version of this movie that doesn't end on Tessa's face. It's impossible. We've been with this woman this entire time. So there is like a little bit that's longer, and Kate says will probably be on the DVD. I don't know what that means, but probably. if there's a DVD, and so
Well,
the
I
movie's,
hope there's a DVD.
yeah, I would hope so too. But you know, the movie's 75 minutes, whatever. It's a pre-code,
Yeah.
pre-code length.
We could,
Half of that's credits anyway.
you know, put a little featurette on there. You know?
Yeah, there's all kinds of stuff you can do. I would like to see fake trailers for like other fake medieval movies, or like a cartoon. Like you could do like a whole newsreel, like medieval newsreel. There's a lot you can do with a 75-minute movie.
Mm-hmm.
When it screens, it's screened before at festivals with a short film that pairs with it, and even with the short film, you're still getting out in under 100 minutes, and you can't beat that.
Any more questions? Oh, excuse me.
I was wondering if you could talk about the score.
Sure. If you're curious about the score, I encourage you to come to see Excalibur tomorrow at 4:45. It's going to be introduced by the composer of this film, Zach Kober. So he and I worked together on this, like, I think the actual iterative process for him came about when we had a cut. Or he had put together some temp tracks while we were cutting. But from the beginning, for as long as I've been working on this film, I've been talking to him about scoring it, and I was adamant about an electronic score in this movie. I only wanted an electronic score because, one, how often do you see a medieval movie with an electronic score? A lot of times it's like the little flute and drum, and we love the little flute and drum, of course. I just got out of Flesh and Blood, so much little flute and drum in there.
Yeah.
But an electronic score also would do a lot, I think, to create that uncanniness between the era of the film and then the era that it was made into. That kind of weird thing where it's like they're medieval melodies. It's recognizable as medieval music, it's just made on like a Korg. But it's still medieval music, and it feels sort of like, it felt at peace with what we were trying to do, sonically, and I think it adds a lot to the film. There's also some like medieval faves that I had to put in, like we had to have green sleeves for the Christmas scene, right? And I love that, because I love green sleeves. Especially the surf version by the Trashmen, it's on YouTube, you should all look it up. I love green sleeves so much, so I had to have it in there, even though it didn't become a Christmas song until like the 18th century, but we won't tell. Yeah.
Nothing's fine.
There was another hand in the back.
Yeah, I was just wondering about the eclipse at the end. Was that like, because you said you wrapped 3 years ago.
That was the eclipse.
Was
The-
that 3 years ago?
Well, no, so we wrapped principal photography in the studio
Did you
3 years ago.
decide to do it once the eclipse was coming, or like, how did that happen?
Kate, do you remember when I asked you about the eclipse?
I think, I remember talking about it in the warehouse. I think we started then and we're like, depending on where we're at with it.
Right, like I had read somewhere that there was gonna be an eclipse or whatever, and we were
Yeah.
like, haha, no way we'll still be filming this 2 years later.
It was a year later than
Okay.
that.
Oh, it was only a year later?
Yeah.
Oh my God, what day is it? I don't know.
That was
Yeah.
amazing.
Yeah, we went out there. I just wrote about this for the Talk House, and you can read my account of filming on the eclipse. We all went out there to Plum Beach and brought that foam cross, and we filmed the eclipse, and then we composited it in over, because you can't actually film. The article gets into it, but
What's the article?
I wrote about the eclipse. I think if you just, I'll send it to you. I'll just text it to you after this. I have your number, it's okay. But yeah, the eclipse, it was crazy. We had to film it separately and then composite it in, basically, as the TLDR, because the eclipse makes everything so dark that you can't. It's crazy. Eclipses are crazy. But there was one allegedly at the crucifixion, so I thought, maybe did it start out as a joke and then we ended up having to do it because of the shooting schedule? I think that's what.
I want to be the other movie, Us and Barabbas, was the original.
Oh yeah, it was like, it's gonna be us and the Richard Fleischer 1962 sword and sandal biblical drama Barabbas. Because a lot of the things that we associate now as being artificial, like people's scale, the scale of somebody being bigger relative to other people, or things aren't very three-dimensional, or people, their heads are turned a certain way, or whatever. Those are all very deliberate choices. They're part of the kind of alphabet of medieval art and archetypes and you know, visual metaphor that a viewer would be familiar with. So we tried to do that as much as possible. Both because we're freaks who love the Middle Ages and medieval art, and also because it was going to be a really good way to render a world that's alien to us. And we made the visions more realistic, like we shot them in a real place, in bigger places, in natural light, on the beach, eclipse, whatever, because we wanted that to be more recognizable. I think when you're dealing with historical fiction, and especially an era like the Middle Ages, which is very maligned, people are very quick to assume the worst about this era because we've been trained to by capitalists. But basically, if you're doing anything that's like reminiscent of the medieval era, you're already operating with like a certain degree of audience remove because it's unfamiliar to us, And also we associate it with being kind of like stinky and fucked up. And it was stinky and fucked up, but there's a lot of sublime beauty in a very stinky and fucked up era. Not unlike the sublime beauty that exists in our own stinky and fucked up era.
I mean, it is interesting because I mean, there's a way to make a film like this where everything feels like very staged, and there's a way to kind of make it a little bit more emotional. And you're kind of like in a really experimental zone where, you know, sometimes you feel like you're watching this medieval movie, and sometimes you feel like you're watching something that's like trying to be a little bit more, I don't know what the word that I'm looking for, like spiritual, like maybe like really like tactile.
I love the transcendental style in film, the book and the concept.
Yeah.
And some of my favorite films are included in what is considered by scholars as the transcendental style. And the moving image specifically has a lot of ability to create that because you're dealing with like the size of things, how close and far away they are, you know, how things are framed, how they're staged, etc. And I also, you know, have spent many a happy hour watching great works of experimental cinema here at this very theater, obviously. And when you're working with a lot of like constraint and limitations, you guys take it easy. We'll wrap up soon because I gotta go to the bathroom.
Oh yeah, no, you know what? I remembered what I was comparing it to. I was thinking about Jourdain.
Oh hell yeah, absolutely, right on the money. Yeah, Derek Jarman's like one of the great experimental filmmakers of our era who makes these kinds of more narrative things, you know. And that was a big one for us too. But like that's the constraint, right? Like you're making a movie in a very artificial environment. You don't have a lot of room, don't have a lot of money. You can't always get everything historically accurate. But like, what are you gonna do? You're gonna look at how other people have managed to pull it off. And the answer to bring it all full circle is being selective about what really has to land and emphasizing the things that do and not worrying too much about all the little. I mean, there's a lot of minute detail in this movie. Obviously, it's very meticulous, but not belaboring the wrong things.
Yeah.
You know?
Well, thank you so much for sharing this film with all
Thank
of
you
us.
so much. Thank you all for coming. Tell everyone you know. Come see it tomorrow or throughout the city the rest of the month of April. To get the word out, because you know what? Like, if you don't, who will?
Yeah, tell everybody about this.
Tell
movie.
everybody.
Tell your friends.
There'll be a cleanse, and it's playing Easter Sunday at Nighthawk House.